So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Brexit and the stab in the back theory. Now, this is one you learn in school, in England at least, which I've learned about the First World War. At least my teacher taught me about it. It's quite interesting theory. A load of rubbish, obviously, but interesting nonetheless. That essentially some of the German generals couldn't acknowledge that they lost, so they blamed everyone else essentially, or at least certain people in society who are typically looked down upon. So the mediocrity of Lord Frost isn't ordinary. There is an epic quality to his failings. That's true. Nothing he does is a failure. He claims everything as a success, including Brexit. His economic ideas are a load of baloney as well. No serious person outside the ruling elite doubts that Frost and Johnson's hard Brexit heightened the misery of millions. It's true, the cost of living crisis, you can attribute that partially to Brexit. The falling pound, rising cost of imports, rising cost of exports as well, costing the economy money. So many things you can attribute to just Brexit itself. They have raised inflation, diverted the energy of Britain's rulers away from the economic crisis into needless disputes with our neighbours, which is true. They've absolutely just caused constant battles with the EU and specific EU member states like France, and it's just been a nightmare all round the last few years. Extremist movements face their greatest danger when their supporters realise all hope is gone. Failure brings the risk that the faithful will think again and walk away, and we've seen that in Tory heartland seats in by-elections recently. That the people who are die-hard Tories who always voted Tory either voted Lib Dem or did not turn out at all. The Brexit thing is failing. They said in 2019 they got Brexit done. Now they're kind of reeling it back because they're claiming they haven't. It's just endless culture wars here, and in a country where the cost of living is getting really bad, culture wars won't always win for them. In a country where the majority of people are doing okay, you can win on culture wars. In a country where that's not the case, you can't, especially with rising interest rates. Conservatives might now move from nationalism to patriotism and contemplate the compromise the UK must take to repair the damage they have caused. And again, nationalism is different to patriotism, but they've caused so much damage to this country. They clearly do not love this country. Without visible benefits from Brexit, betrayal narratives are all the leaders of the Brexit right have to hold on to the movement together. And the fact is that you got Mog talking about changing signs in hallways, fish fingers and cheese, and making sparkling wine in plastic bottles instead of glass. I mean, this is the best he has. That's embarrassing. Visible without benefits from Brexit, betrayal narratives are all the leaders of the Brexit right have to hold on the movement together. Sorry, I mentioned that. They must persuade their followers and perhaps themselves they have not wasted their lives on a futile exercise, because at the end of the day, that's all they've done. Mog's ideas are a load of rubbish. Honestly, he's probably one of the ministers that's failed the most because his job is nigh on impossible. He can't do it. The right is talking to itself rather than to the country. I mean, that's partially true. Your leaders did not take you for fools. You were betrayed. We were all betrayed by saboteurs who turned the victory into defeat. And that's what they talk about endlessly. They talk about the Hillary Benn Act. They call it the Surrender Act. They blame Theresa May. They blame the duress we were under. They blame, the electorate essentially, in a sense, for electing the 2017 lot of MPs. It's just madness. The UK is witnessing a modern version of the stab in the back myth that the beaten German generals of 1918 used to shift the blame for their defeat in the First World War away from the military and onto socialists, pacifists and Jews in Berlin. And that's something Hitler used as well. He used the stab in the back theory to explain away Germany's loss in World War One and used that as a way to gain support for himself. That we lost World War One because of the socialists, the people who didn't want to fight, the pacifists and the Jews, of course, always them. They always get blamed for everything. Yet whatever lies they told, Erich Ludendorff and the rest of the High Command accepted that Germany had lost the war because at the end of the day, especially with the American intervention, they lost. Brexiters do not accept their defeat. They imply rather than acknowledge failure by shifting responsibility to others. You've got Brexiteers blaming each other, blaming Theresa May, just blaming a whole host of people rather than acknowledging the fact that they were never going to achieve anything that they sought out to achieve, apart from low regulations and taxes. Oh, sorry, not taxes, tax avoidance. That's all they were ever going to get from this. It's endless blaming Ramonas. At what point are they going to hold themselves accountable? That's the key question. Don't blame us, blame the civil servants, he courageously declared last week, talking about Lord Frost. And, he's talking about how the civil servants need to buy into Brexit. No, they don't. Civil servants aren't there to make policy. They're there to help write up legislation. And they're also there to tell you about policy decisions. What can happen if you take X policies? Are certain things legal, etc.? That's the things they're meant to help you do. They're there to help you implement your policies, not much else. The emasculating consequences of subcontracting decision-making to the EU meant British officials could not draw up genuine proposals for liberalisation and change. Now, I don't think that's strictly true. I don't know if that's Frost arguing that or the writer. There were policies we made outside of the EU, and let's not forget the Council of Ministers exists for a reason. Civil servants would have been involved in that to an extent as well. You cannot expect elected politicians, or unelected in Frost's case, to know what to do with Brexit, he implied. So it was Frost that was implying that earlier statement. The simple fact is, Frost has no vision for Brexit aside from low taxes. That's about it. Low tax and I think low regulation. And those both have consequences. That's all he has, and nothing else, about what's the future for Britain's trade. For example, Patrick Minford talks about the end, essentially, of agriculture and manufacturing in the UK. Is that what Brexiteers want? Because if it is, that's not going to end well for us. How many other countries are there in the G20 that are solely based on services? Not many, I'd assume. The servants were responsible for the ignorance of their masters. Simply not the case. That's what Frost will argue, but at the end of the day, that's not their job. Ministers are there to dictate policy. Civil servants are there to help them implement policy. The public sector as an enemy within is a recurring Brexit theme. Ian Duncan Smith Centre for Brexit Studies, no, this man should not be running an organisation, this man's a clown, showed it was a front organisation for the Tory right by beginning its latest report with an airbrushing of the historical record. Niall Ferguson, a historian himself, apparently said the referendum had taught him the public was ready to pay a significant amount to divorce from the EU, but we know that's not the case. He forgot, because he had to forget to stay in with the right, that the Leave campaign dismissed warnings of significant cost to the public as Project Fear. They said it wouldn't cost us anything, £350 million a week we pay into the EU, let's fund the NHS instead. Let's not forget that Suella Braverman said on Question Time that we wouldn't actually pay anything to the EU, we would get a windfall from the European Central Bank from the investments we have there. So Braverman said we'd actually get a windfall, we'd actually make money from Brexit. Where's that money? Oh wait, Boris Johnson got rid of it in the negotiations. The money we would have got from the ECB. Thanks, Boris. But that wouldn't have even made up for the amount we'd have to still pay into the EU budget. And that the Conservative government of 2022 is so scared of revealing the true price that it won't publish an impact assessment of the damage, because Mogg calls these things predictions and talks about how the figures that they came up with before Brexit were wrong, so he's not going to play these numbers. But all he's got to do is look at the actual damage. This isn't a hypothetical that we're looking at here. You look at the information, you do detailed reports on the changes that Brexit has created, and therefore you can create an impact assessment out of that. It's not hard, Mogg, mate. I know in the Victorian era they might not have had impact assessment reports, but in the kind of modern era we do. The report concludes the refusal of civil service to give Brexit its wholehearted support explains why Brexit Britain has failed to turn the UK into what it calls a leading voice for civilization. Again, blaming the civil servants. They're facing a 20% cut in the amount of staff in the civil service as well. But it shows you the kind of mediocrity of politicians where they will blame everyone else apart from themselves. They will never take responsibility for anything. Go deeper into the myth of the cornered right, and the all-powerful civil servant isn't the only monster you meet. Asked why Brexit is still bedevilled by arguments over Ireland, Frost blamed the madness of the hung Parliament of 2017-2019 passing the Surrender Act, his words, something I mentioned earlier. He blames Hillary, the Benn Act, that a blocked no-deal Brexit forced him to compromise, but at the end of the day, we could have still gone for a no-deal Brexit if we wanted to. It's just ridiculous, the statements he's making. They could have broke off the agreement they had with the EU in 2019 if they wanted to, the withdrawal agreement, etc. They could have tried some dodgy stuff like they are now. It's just blaming Hillary Benn and the Ramonas in Parliament is ridiculous. And in that sense, you are blaming the electorate as well, let's not forget. He must think everyone on the right has forgotten that he and Johnson agreed to the border in the RC, which is absolutely true. They agreed to it, the front stop, essentially. The Trumpian special pleading and Orwellian denial of reality go unremarked. because too many people, including too many on the left, fear the loneliness of breaking with the tribe. I mean, I don't get what he's talking about that. People have lost friendships over Brexit, fear with breaking with the tribe. I mean, that's a ridiculous statement. I think trying to blame the left for not calling out Brexit when we have done. You cannot publicly describe the harm Brexit has inflicted and expect to keep your job in the Conservative Party, Tory press, or right-wing think tanks. For the most part, that is true. I have seen some people in the Telegraph talk about how Brexit is a problem, so I don't think that's 100% true, but for the most part, it is. The career of Frosty, the straw man, which is hilarious, makes my point. He used to work for the Scottish Whisky Association after a remarkable career in the diplomatic service. He opposed leaving the EU, as David Cameron, Liz Truss, and most of the Tory mainstream did, and warned audiences with a surprising statement that it would cost each citizen in the UK around £1,500 a year. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's a lot of money. When the Tory mainstream charged right, Frost charged with them. In fact, he led them. His Brexit boosterism earned him commissions from the Telegraph, a seat in Johnson's cabinet, and a peerage in less than 4 years, because, he became a zealot in the end. Same with Liz Truss. The conspiracy theorist choice of targets tells you how they see the future as well as the past. We saw how who they blamed in Germany, and we're seeing a kind of parallel today that they'll blame everyone else apart from themselves, so that Brexiteers can say, well, this isn't the Brexit I wanted. My Brexit would have gone great. Kind of like when they quoted Trump on saying he would invade Syria. Trump said, yeah, but I would have done it better. These are the worst people in society, the ones that say, oh yeah, I would have done it better, but never explain how they would have done anything better. And they will sit on the sidelines, so they never have to get involved, but they will criticise everyone else, the worst kinds of people. The refusal of British Conservatives to accept responsibility predicts a future in which they'll go all out to destroy the independent institutions that failed to make the Tory dreams come true. They're constantly attacking things like the judiciary, the OBR, the IFS, so many different independent institutions because their Brexit utopia could never happen. Frost has already resigned from Johnson's cabinet, so you can argue Conservatives to go further and faster to the right. I mean, he's really endeared himself to the ERG. He may be an unscrupulous mediocrity, but that does not stop him from clearly seeing the Conservative Party's final terminus. And I hope that, it is the end of the line for the Tory party. But you never know. They've been around for a long time, and there's a reason for that, because they know how the game works. They have a lot of money and a lot of resources, and absolutely they know how to win. So I don't think this is the Conservative Party's last terminus. I'm not 100% convinced they'll get decimated at the next election either, to be honest with you, but that's just my pessimism. But at the end of the day, the Brexiteers are pushing the stab in the back theory. Daniel Hannan has pushed it, was saying, I would have said we should stay in the single market as an interim measure, even though we basically did during the transition period of a year. I think that ended in 2020, I think it ended, and then we kind of unilaterally extended it ourselves because we didn't have the input measures in place. So we did actually stay in the single market for a bit longer. Had Brexiters been a bit smarter and Johnson been a bit smarter, we could have extended the transition period and made ourselves a smoother exit, but the dogma of Brexit did not allow it to happen. So Frost's ridiculous statements attacking everyone else, and he will never accept responsibility for his failings. It's just sad. Same with Mogg, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, or name any Brexiteer. They will never accept the fact that in the end their kind of Brexit dreams will never come true. Well, I suppose Liz Truss's might, because she might become Prime Minister. But that's about it. But I'm rambling now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.